So we're sitting here and I'm thinking, the way that the UAE conducts itself now and the way that Emirati officials seem to view the world is very similar to the way that the Trump administration moves and conducts itself as well. I think the outcomes are somewhat different, but the way in which they view things to me seems very similar. And it reminds me of something that you said last time we were talking about this, which is that the Emiratis are behaving as if they're sort of stuck with all of these dead institutions, all this dead weight that they don't need, and they're trying to shed it.
Hmm.
They're trying to shed all of this dead weight, and that's why they've left OPEC.
Yeah. I mean, they see OPEC as hamstringing them, and they've been, I'd say, building their ejection seat from OPEC since 2008, where they're trying to diversify the country's economy. They've really been waiting for this moment for a long time, and under the cover of the Iran war, it's the perfect time to say, we're going to hit the eject button, and we're done. We're moving on. We're charting our own course.
Yeah, I think that's a very accurate way of putting it. And I mean, and again, it's worth noting it's not going to stop with OPEC. If you're in the GCC, you're probably thinking to yourself, how much time does this organization have?
Hmm.
Because realistically, this is not the last organization they're going to leave. And I think it just has to do with a different vision of the region. And it's a vision of the region that's very zero sum.
Hmm.
You have losers and you have winners, and the UAE does not want to be a loser. And I think that's what they think. That's what they think of OPEC. They think it's essentially a collection of losers. Um,
Ouch.
and they're not saying that, but like that, based on how they've behaved, seems to be their opinion of it. Saudi, we've been talking about this. What's the one thing that the UAE has really gone all in on since the early 2000s? It's been economic diversification. Has it worked perfectly? Has it insulated them from all the terrible shocks in the world? No. But have they gotten to a point where you can look at their oil economy and say, yeah, I can see a transition in the next 15 to 20 years that kind of works? I think they're probably at that stage right now. And I think leaving OPEC is a part of that. Because if you
Yeah.
stay in OPEC, well, I mean, you can talk about this.
Well, yeah, I mean, it comes down to the fact that since 2008, they've really diversified their economy and they've brought in billions in foreign investment. They've created huge financial, Dubai's become a world financial center. And the UAE, this is from Lloyd's, in 2022, foreigners had parked $225 billion alone in financial assets and real estate in the country. 225 billion. That is a huge amount of money. They've also had huge increases in their property values too across the country, and they've developed Emirates into a world-class airline and Dubai into a logistics hub. So they're not dependent on a single resource.
And I think that's why they've been more aggressive against Iran than any of their neighbors. I think that's a part of it, anyways,
Hmm.
because they have more to lose. They diversified into a sector of the economy that's vulnerable to this, which is logistics. Okay, you're not tied to a single resource anymore, but you are tied into keeping trade networks open, keeping routes open. And if you can't do that, this is going to harm that very deliberate transition that they have been planning for such a long time. And so that's why I think we're seeing more pushback from them than anyone because they're trying to protect their investment. They have poured a lot of money into transitioning away from an oil-based economy, and That's a threat. That's being threatened. Whereas I think, if you look at what Saudi Arabia is doing, that's a much more defensive posture.
Hmm.
They're trying to protect what they have. They're both trying to protect what they have, but they're doing it in different ways. I think just Saudi has been trying to make that transition, but they are not as far along as I think they would like to be. Let's
Hmm.
just put it at that.
Yeah. And I want to jump in real quick.
Please.
The Emiratis are protecting not only the present, but they're protecting their future. And they're expanding their future across the region and their present as well into North Africa, East Africa, West Africa. And the Saudis, I think, are protecting what has built their country over the last 40 years. And they're trying to expand that into protecting their future, but they don't have the personnel and they don't have, I would say, they can't do it right now.
It's an insurmountable logistical problem that they face. They don't have the labor base that they would need to do the things that they want to do. United Arab Emirates knew they didn't have the labor base, which is why they imported everything, which is why you have a situation where I think Native Emiratis are maybe 11% of the population. Saudi Arabia, its native population is about 65%. So it's a little less extreme there. And they brought a huge chunk of people in just in the last 15 years. Foreign laborers went from being 27% to 44% of the population, about. But they're still not at a space where that infrastructure, that base, that ease of doing business, that's stuff that takes decades to build, and they don't have that time.
No, no, time
Eh,
is definitely not on their side with this. And they're
no,
rapidly trying to catch up. And that's why they're pushing so much into building the country into a tech hub. They're going, we need to get as many tech workers into the country, but they're already behind the eight ball here.
yeah. And I think with that perception comes a lot of defensiveness. And I think that defensiveness has spurred a lot of developments in the last couple of months regionally. And I think it's really spurred an antagonistic relationship with the UAE. Now, I'm not going to say that the UAE is blameless in that relationship because they're not, but the tension between the two countries has a lot to do with that defensive posture coming from Riyadh, where they feel like we're the regional power.
Hmm.
We're the people who should determine the pace of change in the region, and we're behind the eight ball.
Yeah.
And
And
they're
in the
not
last,
happy about that. They're
no,
not happy about that.
no. And in the last 3 years, you've had the UAE, Israel, and Turkey have really asserted themselves in the
Yeah.
region and into Africa as well,
I mean, even Iran.
and Iran as
It,
well. And that's
it,
that's why
it,
they're
this is the thing. I think Saudi Arabia would actually be perfectly happy, maybe not happy, but they would be okay if they were locked into a regional dynamic where it was them, Iran, and Israel. I don't think they would have a problem with that if that was the setup of the region. Maybe Turkey, maybe Egypt, okay. But if the three or the two players were Saudi and Iran, I they don't like the Iranians, but I think they could live with that. Now, the issue is that's not the world they're going into. You're looking at a much more complex regional situation where I don't necessarily think that the people in Ankara are going to be taking marching orders from Riyadh. I definitely don't think that the people in Abu Dhabi are going to be taking
No.
marching orders from Riyadh. And I think you're going to have to get comfortable with the idea that however paramount you may think you are going to be one of many regional powers. That's a regional environment that I think everyone in the world, I don't care where you live, you can live in Doha, you can live in Des Moines, you're going to have to put yourself into brace position because as we've seen over the last couple of months, this is a economically, geopolitically, culturally important part of the world that you ignore at your peril. If you think the regional dynamics are simple, you may be up a particular creek without a particular instrument. This is not a situation that is going to resolve easily or without, I would say, a lot of blood and treasure being lost in the process. And I don't think that fracturing between multiple powers is not something that's going to go away. I don't see a paramount power emerging.
Well, yeah,
Again,
I don't either. I don't either.
no, I don't think it's possible,
Well,
to
no,
be
because
blunt.
there's way too many regional powers in there vying for influence, and the institutions that actually held this region together. I mean, this is just another nail in the coffin of the institutions that held the world together for much of the 20th century. And the
Yep.
legacy of this decade and going into the next decade, it's going to be a disruption of politics, information tech, medicine, and everything that we've come to know over the last couple of generations. And it's
Mhm.
going to continue to disrupt the region as these countries recognize that we can go on our own and we can potentially take more from others because it is a zero sum game.
Dog eat dog. I mean, it really is. And, or it isn't, but that's how the actors involved are perceiving it. And I think you can look at it and it's clear that some are more than others. Saudi Arabia, I think, is still embracing these institutions, but the reason they're embracing the institutions is because they dominate them. So in the GCC, in OPEC, certainly in OPEC now, they're trying to preserve these institutions because they're in the middle of the institution. And the irony, I think, is for a very long time, and probably still, Saudi diplomats had a real reputation for just completely undermining every institution they were a part of. There's a whole literature of particularly like climate activists talking about every time there was any kind of treaty about limiting emissions, you just waited for the Saudis to show up. They'd always come in late. They'd walk in the room. They'd throw in some just legalistic logic bomb that no one had even considered that would just blow up the whole conversation. No one could agree on anything. The treaty would go out the window, and then, they take the cab back to OPEC. So this is kind of brutal irony because now they have all of these institutions and no one's paying attention to them. Um, the UAE strategy just seems to be to leave. Israel's not in any of them. Uh, Turkey, I think for now, is more or less going along, but they have their own institutions and their own agenda. And yeah, and I think there's a fear of irrelevance that is driving a lot of the Saudi decision-making process. And to just set this off, Dave, what's one of the big stories where Saudi seems to be making their own institutions to keep their name in the papers?
What story is it, Gavin?
Oh, we've been talking about this. We're gonna be talking about this.
We are.
We are.
Well,
You
this
know what I'm
happens.
talking about.
I do. This is Saudi's defense pact with Pakistan.
Hip hip hooray.
Yay.
Yay. So yeah, so they have pact, treaty, whatever you want to call it. Recently, there was an agreement that basically, in exchange for the usual Saudi economic largesse, they now fall under the Pakistani defense umbrella, including, even though it's not explicitly stating, including Pakistan's nuclear umbrella, which is, I think, something that's caused no small concern amongst the neighboring states. It has also probably not caused a lot of spontaneous love in the Republic of India, but that's another story. Um, yes, this is a story that's sort of gone under the radar because I think it happened either right before, right at the start of the Iranian conflict. But this is something we're going to come back to real soon because it is having big implications, very much in line with what we've been talking about today.
Yeah, and it kind of magnifies what is happening and magnifies conflict between the UAE and Saudi Arabia. And with that, we want to thank you guys very much for tuning in to this episode of On the Fringe. Please like, comment, subscribe, share, send your favorite meme to Gavin. Gavin is a big collector of memes. Aren't you, Gavin? Oh, I take it that's a big yes. You can send him 15 to 20 of these, and he'll be as happy as a clam. And with that, we're going to hit the button, aren't we, Gavin?
Please hit the button.